You don't hate learning. You hate the way you've been taught. That constant pressure to memorize things you don't understand, to repeat information that feels empty, to chase grades instead of clarity. It slowly drains your curiosity until learning feels like a burden instead of power. You sit there staring at pages, rereading the same lines, hoping something will click, but deep down you already know it won't. And then comes the worst part. You start blaming yourself. You begin to think, maybe you're just not smart enough, maybe others are naturally better, maybe this just isn't for you. But that belief is built on a broken system. You were never taught how to think, only what to remember. You were trained to follow, not to question. So when things get complex, your mind freezes because it was never allowed to break ideas apart and rebuild them in a way that actually makes sense. That frustration you feel isn't weakness. It's a signal that something is wrong with the method, not with you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you keep learning this way, nothing will change. You'll keep forgetting, keep struggling, keep doubting yourself, not because you lack ability, but because you're using the wrong approach. The moment you realize that understanding is more powerful than memorization, everything begins to shift. Learning stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like control. And once that switch happens, your mind doesn't just improve, it wakes up. You've been told that smart people are fast, flawless, and always certain, that they hear something once and instantly understand it, that they never struggle, never hesitate, never feel lost. That image has been repeated so many times that you've started measuring yourself against it, quietly deciding that if you don't match it, then you must be lacking. So when something confuses you, you panic. When you don't understand, immediately you assume you're falling behind. And instead of slowing down and thinking deeper, you rush because you believe speed equals intelligence. But real understanding doesn't work like that. It's slower, it's uncomfortable. It forces you to sit with confusion instead of escaping it. And that's exactly what most people avoid. They would rather move on than admit they don't fully get something. They would rather stay silent than ask a basic question. That fear of looking foolish becomes a prison, locking your mind in a cycle of shallow learning. What makes this way of thinking powerful is that it completely flips that belief. Struggle is no longer a sign of weakness. It becomes proof that your brain is actually working. Asking simple questions is no longer embarrassing. It becomes the smartest move you can make. When you stop chasing the image of being naturally smart and start focusing on building real understanding, something shifts inside you. You become patient. You become curious again. And most importantly, you stop running from difficulty and start using it as fuel to grow. Here's the first harsh truth. If you can't explain something in simple words, you don't understand it. Not halfway, not almost, not I think I get it. You don't understand it at all. That realization hits hard because it exposes something most people try to hide. You can read a chapter, highlight every line, memorize definitions, even solve problems by following patterns, and still have no real understanding. It creates an illusion of knowledge, and for a while that illusion feels safe. But the moment you're forced to explain it, the truth shows up instantly. You've probably felt that moment before. Someone asks you a simple question and suddenly your mind goes blank. You search for words, try to piece together something that sounds right, but it falls apart. That's not pressure, that's exposure. It reveals the gap between what you think you know and what you actually understand. And instead of facing that gap, most people avoid it. They go back to memorizing, back to repeating, back to hiding behind complexity. But clarity doesn't come from more information. It comes from breaking things down until they are so simple that they feel obvious. That process is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront your confusion directly. It forces you to admit, I don't really get this. And that's exactly where real learning begins. The moment you stop pretending and start simplifying, your mind shifts from storing information to actually building knowledge. The difference is this. Instead of hiding confusion, you attack it. You stop pretending things make sense when they don't. You stop moving forward just to keep up. You slow down, not because you're weak, but because you're finally serious about understanding. And that changes everything. Confusion stops being something to avoid and becomes something to investigate. Every unclear idea turns into a target, something you break apart piece by piece until it loses its power over you. You begin stripping away all the unnecessary complexity. The long explanations, the complicated terms, the polished definitions, they all start to feel like distractions. What matters is the core idea, the simple truth underneath everything. And when you focus on that, something powerful happens. Your brain stops feeling overloaded. It starts organizing information in a way that actually makes sense. Instead of memorizing layers of confusion, you build a clear structure that you can rely on. This process isn't fast, and that's exactly why it works. It forces you to engage, to question, to test your own understanding again and again. You explain things in your own words. You challenge yourself to make it simpler. And every time you succeed, even a little, your confidence grows. Not fake confidence based on repetition, but real confidence built on clarity. That's when learning becomes different. It stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like control. You're no longer guessing or hoping you'll remember. You actually understand. And once you reach that point, even difficult ideas stop feeling intimidating, because you know you have the ability to break them down and master them. Second harsh truth: most students are not learning, they are performing. They sit in classrooms, take notes, memorize slides, and repeat information just well enough to pass. It looks like progress from the outside, but inside, there's very little understanding. It's a cycle built on pressure and shortcuts. Study for the test, forget after the test, move on to the next topic, repeat, and over time, this becomes normal. You stop questioning it. You start believing that this is what learning is supposed to feel like: rushed, shallow, and temporary. You've probably been part of this cycle more times than you can count. Staying up late to cram information, forcing your brain to hold on to facts just long enough to survive an exam. And when it's over, there's relief. Not because you understood something deeply, but because the pressure is gone. Then, days later, most of it disappears. Not because your memory is weak, but because there was never a strong foundation to begin with. This is where things get uncomfortable, because it means a lot of the effort you've put in hasn't been as effective as you thought. Hours of studying, pages of notes, endless repetition, and still the knowledge doesn't stay. That's not failure. That's misdirection. You were aiming at the wrong target the whole time. Real learning doesn't care about performance. It doesn't reward memorization without understanding. It demands depth. It demands honesty. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. You realize that chasing grades without clarity is like building on sand. It might hold for a moment, but it will never last. But imagine this shift. Instead of asking, "What do I need to remember?" you start asking, "Do I actually understand this?" That one question sounds simple, but it forces a completely different way of thinking. It slows you down in a world that rewards speed, and at first that feels uncomfortable. You might feel like you're falling behind, like others are moving faster while you're stuck on one idea. But what you don't see is that they're skimming the surface while you're building depth. When you focus on understanding, you stop collecting information and start connecting it. You begin to see how ideas fit together, how one concept leads to another, how everything forms a structure instead of a pile of disconnected facts. And that structure becomes your strength. Because once something truly makes sense to you, it doesn't disappear under pressure, it doesn't vanish during exams, it stays solid and reliable. This shift also changes how you deal with difficulty. Instead of avoiding hard topics, you lean into them. You spend more time where it feels uncomfortable because you know that's where the real progress is happening. You stop rushing to finish and start focusing on getting it right. And slowly, something powerful begins to happen. Your confidence stops depending on external results. It comes from knowing that you've done the work to understand. It's not the fastest path, but it's the most effective one. Because when you truly understand something, you don't just pass tests, you master the subject. And that kind of mastery doesn't fade. Students love this approach because it gives them control. For the first time, learning stops being a guessing game. You're not relying on luck, on memorization, or on repeating what someone else says. You know what you know, and you can prove it to yourself anytime. That confidence feels different, quiet, steady, unshakable. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need grades. It doesn't depend on anyone else validating your knowledge. When you truly understand something, you can explain it, apply it, twist it, and explore it in ways that feel natural. The ideas no longer intimidate you. Complex topics become puzzles instead of walls. And that freedom is addictive. You start craving clarity. You start noticing gaps in what you thought you knew and feel compelled to fill them. Learning stops feeling like work and starts feeling like power. This approach also rewires your mind. You stop fearing mistakes because you know they're part of the process. You stop rushing through ideas because you understand that depth matters more than speed. You stop performing for others and start performing for yourself, for your understanding, your growth, your mind. And that is a rare kind of freedom. It's what separates people who are stuck in the cycle of shallow learning from those who truly master their knowledge. Once you feel it, Once you taste that control, there's no going back. Third harsh truth, your biggest enemy is not difficulty, it's ego. You avoid what confuses you because it makes you feel small, inadequate, exposed. You skip the questions that feel too basic. You rush past the problems that seem too hard, and you convince yourself that struggling is a sign of weakness. That's a lie you've been telling yourself for years, and it's quietly killing your potential. Every time you avoid what's uncomfortable, you're training your brain to stay shallow, to settle for surface-level understanding, to accept mediocrity as normal. Most people never realize this because it feels safer to stay busy than to confront their ignorance. They fill their time with tasks, notes, and routines that give the illusion of progress, while real growth quietly slips away. The truth is brutal. If you never admit, "I don't get this," yet you'll never push past the limits of your current thinking. Avoidance feels like protection, but it's really a trap. Confronting your gaps is uncomfortable, yes, but it's where the magic happens. Every idea you wrestle with, every confusion you dig into, reshapes your mind. You start to see patterns, to connect ideas, to think critically instead of parroting information. The moment you embrace that discomfort, ego stops controlling your learning. You stop pretending, stop performing, and start understanding. And here's the final punch. Growth is always awkward, messy, and humbling. If you're not willing to feel stupid for a while, you'll stay exactly where you are, watching others move ahead while you cling to safety. Admitting what you don't know isn't weakness, it's the first step to mastery. Here's the takeaway that can change everything. Stop trying to look smart and start trying to be clear. Forget impressing others with jargon, complex explanations, or polished answers. None of that matters if your mind doesn't actually understand what's happening. Real power comes from simplicity. Break ideas down into their core. Strip away everything that distracts and explain them in the simplest terms possible. If you can teach it to someone else, or even just say it out loud to yourself clearly, you've crossed the line from memorization to mastery. This isn't just a technique, it's a mindset shift. It forces you to confront your confusion instead of hiding from it. It forces you to question assumptions, to test your understanding, and to rebuild knowledge from the ground up. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You'll feel exposed. You'll stumble over words. You'll realize how much you actually didn't know. But that's exactly where transformation happens. That discomfort is the engine of real learning. When you adopt this approach, everything changes. You stop chasing grades, approval, or external validation. You start chasing clarity. Your brain starts connecting ideas naturally. Problems that once seemed impossible suddenly make sense. And the confidence you gain is quiet but unstoppable, because it's built on truth, not pretense. The harsh reality: most people never do this. They cling to the illusion of knowledge, avoiding anything that challenges their ego. But you can choose differently. You can choose depth over speed, mastery over performance, understanding over memorization. One simple shift in perspective, one commitment to clarity, and your learning, your thinking, and your life begin to transform. So now the real question isn't whether this works. It does. The question is whether you're willing to do what most people won't. Are you willing to slow down, face confusion, and admit when you don't understand? Are you willing to strip ideas down to their essence and wrestle with them until they make sense? Because if you are, your mind will change. You'll stop guessing, stop memorizing, and start thinking. You'll gain a clarity that feels like control, a confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else, and a mastery that lasts far beyond exams or fleeting recognition. But if you're not willing, nothing will change. You'll keep performing, keep skimming, keep pretending you understand while staying trapped in shallow learning. You'll watch others move forward while you remain stuck in the cycle of pressure and frustration, blaming yourself instead of your approach. The truth is brutal. Growth only comes to those willing to look stupid, to struggle, to dig deep when it's uncomfortable. Anything less is safe, but also useless. So here's the challenge. Stop chasing the illusion of knowledge. Stop memorizing to perform. Start understanding to master. Attack confusion. Simplify ideas. Teach them. Question everything. Take control of your mind, your learning, your life. The choice is yours. Embrace the hard path and transform, or stay comfortable and stay stuck. The decision you make right now determines the thinker you will become. Choose clarity. Choose mastery. Choose to be unstoppable.